In 2002, a 17-year-old Canadian girl in baggy pants and a necktie changed music forever. She sold over 50 million albums worldwide. She influenced everyone from Billie Eilish to Olivia Rodrigo. Her songs are still considered some of the best pop punk tracks ever made. But for the past 20 years, almost everyone has misunderstood what she actually did. They called her manufactured. They said she wasn't real punk. They accused her of selling out, and every single one of those criticisms reveals way more about us than it does about her. This is the story of Avril Lavigne, the artist everyone judged but nobody understood. Let's start with the biggest criticism, that Avril Lavigne was manufactured, that she wasn't authentic, that she didn't write her own music. Here's the thing though, Avril co-wrote every song on her debut album Let Go with a team called The Matrix. And yes, she worked with professional producers and songwriters. You know who else The Matrix worked with? Korn. Literally Korn. One of the heaviest, most authentic nu metal bands of the era. You know who mixed Avril's album? Tom Lord Alge, the same engineer who worked with Blind 182, Sum 41 and Green Day. So let me ask you this question. Why was Avril called manufactured and too polished for using the exact same people that male pop punk and rock artists used? This is what we call a double standard, and it gets worse. When Avril first became famous, the media portrayed her as the opposite of typical pop stars. She wore ties instead of revealing outfits and was seen as a rocker rather than a pop princess. And in interview after interview, they asked her to trash other female artists, to say she was better than them, more real than them. She refused to play that game. She didn't trash Britney or Christina. She just said she was different, not better. But the damage was done. The industry had created this false competition between women, and Avril got caught in the middle of it. Okay, so we established that the criticism was unfair, but let's talk about what Avril Lavigne actually accomplished, because this is where it gets really interesting. Before Avril, if you're a teenager who liked dark music, your options were limited. You could listen to male-fronted bands and exist on the sidelines, or you could listen to the few female rockers who came before, most of whom were positioned for an older, more alternative audience. Avril changed that equation entirely. Let Go sold over 60 million copies worldwide. Complicated became an instant classic. Skater Boy created an entire aesthetic. She made guitar music accessible and cool for millions of teenage girls who had never seen themselves reflected in rock music before. And I am not exaggerating when I say she changed lives. Billie Eilish has cited her as an influence.
Dude, I want to have my next album. I'm just trying to be Avril Lavigne. Like old Avril Lavigne, that's me.
Olivia Rodrigo grew up idolizing her. Think about it. An entire generation of female rock artists exists because Avril Lavigne picked up a guitar and said, I'm doing this. But it wasn't just the music. Avril created an entire cultural movement. The neckties, the skater gear, the tank top with ties, the heavy eyeliner, the I don't care attitude. She made it acceptable for girls to be angry, to be loud, to be unapologetic, to not smile pretty for the camera. Let's talk about numbers for a second, because numbers don't lie. Girlfriend was recorded in 8 different languages. It was the first YouTube music video to hit 100k views. It was the best-selling single of 2007. Over 50 million albums sold worldwide. Multiple number one hits across different countries. Songs that are still considered definitive pop punk tracks 20 years later. And she is still relevant. Skater Boy trends on TikTok. Gen Z discovers her music and falls in love with it. Her influence is undeniable. So why, with all this evidence, was she so misunderstood? Let's break down every major criticism of Avril Lavigne and why each one reveals how little people actually understood what she was doing. She is not really punk. Avril never called herself punk. She called herself pop punk, which is a completely different genre.
I'm not a punk rocker. I don't have punk music. Maybe I have some punk characteristics about me, but I don't walk around calling myself punk. It's more punk to tell people you're not punk than to sit there and say that you are punk. And whatever. If you want to know what I think that I am, I think that I'm just a rock chick. And I like to rock out. I like to throw shit around. I like to scream. I like to holler. I like to break things. I like to yell. I like to get my anger out.
But even if you're being generous and saying she was punk, let's examine this criticism. Punk is supposed to be about authenticity, right? About being yourself and saying screw the rules. About not conforming to what people expect of you. Avril Lavigne was a teenage girl from a small town in Canada who loved country music. Then she discovered rock and decided that's what she wanted to do. She dressed how she wanted. She wrote songs about her actual teenage experiences. She refused to be sexy when the industry demanded it. So the punk persist criticized her for not conforming to their definition definition of punk. Do you see the irony here? The whole point of punk is not conforming, and they are mad that she didn't conform to punk. She was authentic to herself, not to a genre's arbitrary rules, and somehow that made her not punk enough. She changed too much. This one always makes me laugh. People criticize Avril for evolving as an artist, for not staying the same 17-year-old forever. She literally sung "Gotta Make a Change and Break Away" on her first album. She told us she was going to evolve, and when she did, people acted shocked. When male artists evolve, we called artistic growth and maturity. We praised them for taking risks and exploring new sounds. When female artists evolve, we call them sellouts. We claim they are not who they used to be. Avril went from pop punk to more pop-oriented sounds, then to electronic influences, then back to rock. You know what that's called? Having a career that spans decades. That's called being an artist. The conspiracy theory. We need to talk about that Melissa Vandella conspiracy theory. For those who don't know, there's a wild theory that Avril died in 2003 and was replaced by a lookalike named Melissa. It's completely false, obviously, but here's what's fascinating about this conspiracy. It reveals how uncomfortable we are with people changing. It was easier for people to believe that Avril Lavigne died and was replaced by a clone than to accept that she's a complex, evolving person who is allowed to change her style, her sound, and her image. Too pop versus too rock. And finally, the ultimate catch. Pop fans said she was too rock. Rock fans said she was too pop. She existed in this liminal space that made both genres' gatekeepers uncomfortable. She wasn't easily categorizable, and that threatened people. That in-between space is exactly what made her revolutionary. She brought rock to pop audiences and pop sensibles to rock. She built a bridge that millions of fans walked across, and for that crime she was called inauthentic. Avril Lavigne had a successful career. She is still making music. She is wealthy and famous. Why does it matter that she was misunderstood? It matters because we're still doing it. Taylor Swift gets called calculated and manufactured. Billie Eilish gets accused of being an industry plant. What we owe Avril Lavigne. The same double standard Avril faced 20 years ago are alive and well. She inspired a whole generation of girls to pick up guitars, showing that femininity and rock can exist together. By being open about her emotions, she proved that vulnerability is not a weakness. In the process, emotional honesty became something to be proud of. Every teenage girl who started a band in the last 20 years stands on Avril's shoulders. Every woman who has been told she is too much or not enough has Avril as proof that you can succeed anyway. She is still here, still touring. Her message has always been simple. Be yourself and say fuck you to anyone who has an opinion otherwise.